Welcome back to Risky Business, a show about making better decisions. I'm Maria Konnikova.
And I'm Nathaniel Silver.
You just can't leave it alone. You can't just be Nate Silver. I'm going to call you Nathaniel this entire show. Just watch. Just watch
I'm
Nathaniel.
going to spend a little time in Florida, and there, Nate, Nate, is very often Nate if you have, like, for an example, an
Oh, that's
Uber or Lyft
funny.
driver. So, Nathaniel might be needed in the mix a little bit here.
All right, Nate. Let's let's get going. Today on the show we have some poker drama. Nate, we haven't. Oh, sorry, Nathaniel. We haven't.
Nathaniel.
We haven't done poker drama for a while, but this is poker drama that's squarely in the intersection of the poker world and the non-poker world, and that, as a writer, as a creator, really grabbed me, and I'm guessing grabbed you as well. And it has to do with the No Limit documentary series that was released a few weeks ago. But no, dear listeners, you will not be able to find it anywhere because it has since been scrubbed from the internet. So, Nate, do you want me to give a little bit of a
Yeah,
rundown for our...
why don't you be the backgrounder here? Yeah.
All right. So first of all, this was a documentary that was created by a collaboration between GG Poker, which owns the World Series of Poker, and Artisans on Fire, specifically Dustin Ianotti, who followed last year players during the inaugural $25,000 super main event in the Bahamas, which was the largest ever guarantee in poker history. Lots of compelling storylines. I mean, it was a huge, huge event. I definitely remember seeing it from afar. I was in Vegas at the time. I did not play in it, but being like, wow, like, holy shit, this is huge. So Dustin Ianotti followed players around. According to their original release, they had over 650 hours of behind the scenes footage from the event. 650 hours, Nate. That is a lot of hours. And it was edited down to 8 30-minute episodes. 6 of them had been released by last week when it came out. And I say it came out because there was no, there were no intimations or signs that this was the case. But one of the main characters, Alan Keating, had watched one of the episodes where he appeared and was like, hey, I didn't say this stuff. Like, what is actually going on? And he called out the documentary on Twitter and was like, hey guys, what's going on? Dustin admitted that he had used AI to advance the narrative and put words in Keating's mouth that Keating never actually said. By the way, both Keating's original call out and Ianotti's mea culpa have since been taken off. Anyway, long story short, he said, oh, but this is the only time I used it. Like, not really a big deal. Then there was another Keating who's not at all related, Alex Keating, who's like, actually, wait, no, I'm going to raise my hand too, because also, I see it in my stuff. Anyway, documentary has been taken off. WSOP apologizes and says that they are going to re-edit everything, and that's where we stand right now. I have some very strong feelings on this that go far beyond the poker world, and I'm sure you do too. I'll let you start since I've kind of been hogging the mic with the background of the drama.
Yeah, it was a one-off thing. It's like when people are, like, accused of handsiness or sexual harassment, right? Usually not a one-off thing. It's usually a chronic behavior where you don't recognize a boundary of permission. Yeah. By the way, if you ever interview me for some shit like this, I hate watching myself on TV, so you could probably just make me say whatever. I mean, it would be too lazy to ever check it.
Nate, it's so funny that you said that. I was actually talking with my husband about this, and I was like, I would lose my shit if this happened to me, because I think both of us have appeared in dozens of documentaries. Like, I don't even know how many, but I never watch myself back. And I don't actually think that Keating watched himself back until somebody quoted him back to him, and he was like, wait, I never said that. And then he watched.
No, look, in all seriousness, I am reluctant to give any interviews for something that can be edited even fairly or relatively
Yep.
fairly, right? If you're taping an hour with me and you're going to clip 5 minutes out of it or maybe 15 seconds out of it, right? Like that makes me very nervous, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, and this is kind of advice to people in general. I'm sure we have a lot of influential listeners. Is like, yeah, you should understand kind of like what the journalist's motivation is. If the story's about you and you're a kind of primary character, that's one thing. If you're kind of invited in to provide like color commentary, then yeah, I would be a little bit wary. But look, I think there are a couple of things going on here, right? Like one is like a lack of recognition of what like good journalism or even journalism, good or not, really is. So what's the guy's name? Like
Dustin Ianotti.
Ianotti.
Yep. And I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. That's how it's
Ianotti, whatever. It's an Americanized. You're going with Dustin. We get to pronounce the, if you're like Dante or something, then maybe you could Italianify it, whatever. Dustin, we get to pick how to pronounce your last name. I feel like Dustin. You're giving up your, anyway. But Mr. Dustin posted a lot of, not pretentious, but a lot of very long tweets on X where he's like, poker is losing mind share to chess and F1 and all these other things that should be comparable to poker, and we do much worse. And there are a lot of reasons for this, but one of the reasons is that we're not good enough at like storytelling and narrative, right? Which, okay. I think some people might say, well, okay, is it okay to use ChatGPT to do like a little copy edit on your script? Sure, I would think that's totally fine, right? Is it useful to use AI tools to clean up literal visual defects? I think, sure, it's probably fine. When you are attributing, though, a quote to some person, then you're not allowed to do that. It's like a basic journalism thing. It's also weird. It's also just weird because, like, you tape all this footage and, like, can you really not make the story
650 hours. I just keep saying that because it is mind-boggling to me that you would have that much footage and say that for the sake of narrative, you needed to create something that you didn't have.
Yeah, it's kind of lazy, you know what I mean? Like, that in all that footage, you can't find the quote. Look, yeah, sometimes when you're writing, you're like, boy, I wish the subject had said that, right?
Yes,
what
and
you know what happens if you're a writer, you can actually say it in your own voice. You're like, that's a good idea, right? Or you can, or there are like legitimate ways to paraphrase. Like, if someone like is jumping around the meaning of something, then this is a little bit of a fine art. The BBC got in trouble recently for like splicing together 2 snippets of a Trump speech on January 6th that were like 30 minutes apart or something, and made it seem like he's like, go attack the Capitol right now, right? Or was kind of like, we need to go to the Capitol, blah, 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 half an hour, blah, blah, blah. He was long-winded, and go march there right now. And like, okay, like that clearly was taken out of context, right? Like, I don't know, when you use like the ellipses. Anyway, I'm getting like weird journalism stuff. The point is that
no, but you know what? This weird journalism stuff is actually important because it's been around for a very long time and there are standards for a reason, right? Like the New Yorker, and I think most magazines actually that I've ever written for do not actually allow sources to look through their quotes before you publish, right? Like that's because you don't want someone to be like, well, I don't actually want, to be quoted saying this. Like, you're on the record, you give the interview, like that's it. But you record, right? You have recordings, you have notes, you have all this stuff. You give all of that to fact checkers who actually go through and make sure that this all happened and this all exists. The reason that we do this is that in the past, there have been egregious malpractice issues with journalists who made shit up, right? And who actually did craft the perfect characters or the perfect stories because it suited their, journalistic story, whatever they were trying to tell. And some of them, it was a very, very different time. And so some of them got away with it. So at the New Yorker, someone who absolutely broke my heart was Joseph Mitchell, who died before I don't know if he died before I was born, but this is a different era of New Yorker journalism. And Joseph Mitchell was someone I had really, really looked up to as like a cub writer, because his stories were just filled with these amazing characters, these amazing quotes, these amazing scenes. And I was like, wow, I wish I could do that, right? He writes nonfiction that's like fiction. He finds all of these amazing things and he brings you there. And it turns out his nonfiction was fiction. So as it turns out, he actually did exactly what you were suggesting, Nate. He's like, I wish this quote existed. I'm just going to make it up, and I'm going to create a composite character based on the reporting I did who says all of these things that are very convenient for me to say. Now, like I said, different era, different time. The vaunted fact-checking department did not work the way that it does today. It slipped through. And like I said, it broke my heart because it sets you to an absolutely unattainable standard, right? I was looking at this like, oh, this is what journalism is. No, this is what fiction is. And the reason it was so clean with, all the bows beautifully tied is because it was fiction. Now, he's a beautiful writer, but he's a novelist, right? He's a fabulist. He is not actually someone who is a journalist. And the reason I felt betrayed was because he wasn't saying this is inspired by. He was portraying it as this is literally what happened and these are literally the people I talked to. When you are a documentary filmmaker, you are saying, I am a documentarian. And we're not talking about someone like Ken Burns, right, who's doing a historic documentary about people who are no longer alive and you have historic recreations, et cetera, et cetera. Where you're trying to be, true to the characters, but, John Adams ain't alive, sorry, so we can't go and interview him. But when you're doing a documentary in the modern era, in real time, where you're following people around and you are saying, I am creating a real experience and I am showing you the unvarnished truth, and then you use AI, however you use it, without telling anyone that you're using it, without asking people, is it okay to use it? There are just so many issues here that I think are going to become more and more important to deal with as AI becomes more prevalent, right? But this is something that's existed in journalism long, long, long before AI.
Yeah, there's like Jonah Lehrer. I mean, look, I would see,
Yes.
as a kissing cousin of this at least, is also the data fraud scandals in academia, which often kind of follow this, like Jonah Lehrer, who was at Stephen Glass, Jason Blair was another, or maybe but where it makes the narrative a little bit too neat and perfect, right? And maybe I have like a more general critique of like journalism, where whenever I hear the word storytelling as it pertains to journalism, I get a little bit nervous, right? Because I think that often involves at least oversimplification. It often involves, Manichaean, I don't know how you say that word, turning characters into like good and evil, sometimes caricatures a little bit. And look, I think, in Maria, the books that we write take a long time and involve a lot of research, right? To me, it's also laziness kind of thing, right? Where like you should be able, if I talked to 200 people for my book, I should be able to find, and I can also consult source material. I can read other books, right? Like if I can't find interesting stories out of those 200 interviews, then
that's a you problem.
That's a me problem. What's weird about this this World Series of Poker video is like the quotes from Keating are like they're similar to things that he would say, and they're not really advancing the narrative. It's like, it's just...
No, it was very, I don't understand. But by the way, for listeners, just a bit of context, you threw a lot of names out. Jonah Lehrer was a journalist with The New Yorker as well, and he was fired for just major issues of fabrication. The reason he was caught was inventing a quote by, and listeners, if you have not yet heard this, this is going to shock you, Bob Dylan, right? The one person who you would never invent a quote from, because the fans, Bob Dylan fans, man, first of all, Bob Dylan's still alive. Secondly, Bob Dylan fans, they have gone through every single word that man has ever said with a fine-tooth comb. And believe me, immediately when this quote came out, people were like, oh my God, when did he say this? It's such a beautiful quote about the nature of creativity. Never said it, right? But it was very convenient. So that was Jonah Lehrer. And I think the similarity with data fabrication is, if you're a scientist who has kind of a hypothesis in mind and the data almost fit, it can be very tempting to be like, let's massage this a little bit, right? Let's take out these data points. Let's control for this variable, p-hacking, right? Like that p-hacking is the nice version of it, where you don't actually fabricate anything, but you start controlling for random things so that your p-value becomes significant, so that you hit that significant 0.05 threshold and you're like, haha, I told you. But then when asked, like, hey, why did you control for this? Like, why did you control for that? Like, is there any a priori reason or hypothesis? Oftentimes the answer is like, well, because it became significant only then. So that's kind of the benign version. And the less benign version is when you literally create data points or take away data points or fabricate data out of thin air, which allegedly happened with Dan Ariely and Francesca Gino in some of those studies that are being investigated as we speak.
Yeah, you get different rationales for this, right? Sometimes it's kind of this like postmodern, oh, everybody's doing it. It's all a game for power and influence, right? Sometimes it can have like more of an ideological basis, like, we're on the right side of things and the other side embellishes and cheats. And so like, and by the way, you can find plenty of examples of Democrats doing this, but like one that comes to mind is J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee in the campaign last year, was like, these media narratives, I'm paraphrasing, this is not a direct quote. These media narratives about Haitian immigrants and dogs and cats might be a little bit exaggerated. However, Democrats lie about shit like this all the time, and we need something to grab the media's attention. It was kind of like a Maskoff moment where he's like a little bit more honest about that. And you see that kind of thing happen all the time, right? I mean,
yep.
I don't know. I mean, and there's a difference again between like lies and exaggerations. I mean, during the racial reckoning, I think, the behavior of certain people was exaggerated very much. I mean, there's lots of misinformation out there still. There's a lot of information about like, there's a big controversy on Twitter about like AI data centers and how much water they use. I mean, there's a lot of, but like, but it's also sometimes like a lack of like formal training, right? If people kind of get into like, I guess more and more people that kind of get into like content creation don't kind of, I don't know if this is actually empirically true, right? I imagine fewer of them kind of go to school for journalism or whatnot, right? They can kind of go like viral in their own ways potentially. And, when I was kind of the editor-in-chief at 538, which is partly a ceremonial title, but you did kind of notice difference. We mostly did hire people that were like, had a background in kind of capital J journalism. And I think that helped with this kind of thing, at least.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think you're making a really important point in that, we are living at a time where it can be really difficult to discern, what's the truth and what isn't, right? Where like the lines are so fungible, like there's so much misinformation on every side, and it's true in politics and in everything, that it feels like when you then intentionally do it, right? Like you're just muddying already muddy waters. And to me, it's all, as our listeners know, I'm working on a book about cheating, and it's all kind of these, forms of kind of cheating with what your profession is supposed to do. Unless, like I said, I don't actually necessarily have a problem with using AI if you say like how you're doing it, if you ask people for permission, if you kind of explain what you're going to be doing, if you disclose it, right? If you say like, hey, like this, some of this has been generated with the help of AI for narrative clarity, right? Like whatever it is. I personally wouldn't do that, but like at least do that, and at least kind of have the decency to ask permission from the people who you are interviewing, right? To say like, is it okay if we edit you in this way? Is it okay if we use AI to kind of to move forward the narrative? I don't even remember what the wording is, but you have to ask for permission. Nate, I'm sure that before you do documentaries, like I do, you go through an appearance release form, right? Where you actually have to look at all these things and sign it. I read that shit, and I actually read it really carefully, and I make changes. And I make changes that say that no,
Yeah.
like actually you can't edit this way. No, I don't consent to the use this way. No, you must ask my permission if you're doing this or that, all of these things. And I've had times when I've walked away when I haven't appeared in projects because they weren't okay with my edits. And I had one particular time last year that was really frustrating because it was for this huge Canadian show, and we spent multiple hours filming, and it was all this stuff. And then they gave me, like almost as an afterthought, this absolutely batshit crazy release that I then edited the crap out of, and we couldn't come to an agreement. So it was, they had spent tons of money, right? They had flown out a whole crew, rented out a hotel room, like done all this stuff with me. I had spent all this time, it was like a day gone out of my life. And I was like, you know what? But I'm sorry, you're not going to be using this because I'm not comfortable with the liberties that you may or may not take, right? Maybe it would have been unedited, but the things that I was agreeing to, I was like, I am not okay with that. I want to know exactly how the things, and it was political too, right? It was about Trump. So Nate, like that kind of stuff, you just have to be so careful that people are not going to be using it out of context, juxtaposing it with images or with things that make it seem different from your intention, that they remain true to kind of what you said and how you intended it to be perceived.
Yeah, anything. This is very inside baseball. Anything involving traditional produced television or video or film, right, is like
Yeah.
quite labor intensive relative to the amount of time that the eventual end product uses up, including like being able to shoot a lot of footage with you, and you got to go to some studio, and it always takes. And there's multiple takes. It just always takes longer to produce good taped television than you
Yep.
might think, right? Which is kind of why I'm like, I'll just go on a podcast, you know what I mean? I don't have to like retake things. We very occasionally retake things because we stumble on our words and stuff, Maria. But look, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure. Look, a lot of times when there's bad behavior, people say, well, what about this other thing that's also bad? And it's like, okay, we can debate about how much of an ethical sin is it to quote somebody out of context, or how much of a sin is it to, let's say you give a long interview to a documentary and they take 15 seconds out of that. It's meant to portray you in a bad light out of a 3-hour interview for whatever grudge that they have, right? We can debate, is that unethical? Is it tantamount to like a journalistic sin, right? And I might say more than most people that it is actually, right? However, the things that are clearly journalistic sins, we should not absolve because of the edge case. This is not an edge case. Right?
No,
this is not
an edge case. And I hate the excuse that, oh, well, it's not that much in the grand context of things, right? It's only a few lines here. It's not all the players. No, that doesn't make it more okay. Right? Like, I only fabricated this one quote in my article, Nate. The rest of it is from good reporting.
Well, almost certainly
I only fabricated that one data point to make it all make sense.
Which is almost certainly
that's almost certainly
bullshit,
not
right?
true.
Like, why would you like?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, if you're like, oh, I have this one annoying thing that like it's going to take extra time, but in order to do that, I don't have to like cheat and it's also like.
Yeah,
it's also kind of arrogant to think that like this guy. By the way, isn't he like the video producer for Alan Keating too?
He is. Yeah, that's the weird thing. So this guy who actually blew the whistle is someone who employed this company to run his YouTube channel. and so had been working with them for about a year. So that's honestly, like, to me, that makes it even worse. Like, Nate, imagine like one of our producers on Risky Business, right? We've been working with them, and all of a sudden we find out that they just AI generated an episode for us without asking
Yeah.
us. Like, that would make it worse if they actually then said, like, hey, but we've been working together for multiple years now, so we have a great working relationship, so it's okay. Like, we remain true. We know Nate and Maria. We've worked with them for so long that we know what their thoughts are and where their minds are, and so we promise that this episode was true to their spirit. Unless we both die in a fatal accident, which I hope doesn't happen. I hope there's never a Risky
Hey,
Business.
can you imagine? Like, you would I mean, now there's these things, these fucking AI companions, like your dead fucking
Yeah.
husband or child or stuffed animal or whatever.
By the
Like,
way,
I don't find that very appealing.
producers, just to make sure that you understand, it's still not okay if we die tragically. Just do an episode yourself. You can introduce yourself as hosts and talk about, you know, what pains in the asses we were to work with while we were still alive, and do a nice episode without our own voices. Yeah, it's just, you know, that in some ways makes it even worse because they're betraying an existing relationship, right? There's a level of trust there where, like, if it's someone I've worked with a lot, I would trust that they wouldn't do that to me, right? That they would actually respect what I said, how I said it, et cetera, et cetera. To have someone, it's worse to have it be someone I've worked with than to have it be someone that I'm working with for the first time. So I don't actually think that absolves them in any way. And, you know, it was actually a very interesting impulse on Alan Keating's part to air this on Twitter as opposed to going directly to the producer behind the scenes, because if he had gone behind the scenes, I don't think probably this would not have come out. But I think that he clearly felt betrayed, right? Like, that's a very public way of doing it. And like, and then the original apology, I don't remember what his response to it was, but it was like, are you kidding me? Like, no, like, that's not an apology. Yeah, apparently he said that that the apology does not deserve a response, and you know why. So he was pissed, right? So this is a way to take it to the public forum. I'm not actually sure why he took it down.
These guys who are like very promotion-y. They're like, hey, I'll help promote your shit. And you're like, this guy seems a little cringe, but maybe I need some cringe help, right? Maybe I need some cringe help who will boost my social media channels and blah, blah, blah. I mean, how much poker content do you watch?
I watch poker content in the form of like instructional videos, right? Like, I will watch Run It Once videos. I will watch the course that Isaac Haxton and, you know, Nick Petrangelo and Dan Dvoris put out for GTO Lab. I will watch kind of some of the videos that like GTO Wizard does. I don't really watch a lot of poker drama content, right? Like, I usually watch poker content to learn, and I don't usually watch kind of the dramatic what's happening in the world of poker content. I did watch the first episode of this documentary. I ended up watching it on 2x speed because it was really, I'm sorry, even before I knew about the AI, I was not enjoying it. I found it quite boring. I don't usually like to say, I didn't say this at all publicly because I don't like to say anything negative about content that might bring more people, you know, into poker or whatnot. Like, it's not like there was anything bad about it. I just didn't really think it was good. But now that we know that it was boring while taking these liberties with people's speech, now I feel perfectly entitled to say that after one episode, I did not think it was good. And I never watch video on more than 1x speed. I actually am someone who listens in real time. I do not speed shit up. I sped shit up.
Wait, even
that tells you something.
I'm a good 1.2. By the way, listen, you got to be careful with the 1.2, 1.3 in this show. I'm a pretty fast talker. You can't apply your generic 1.2s and 1.25s and 1.3s to Risky Business. I'm telling you that much. Yeah, there's this perpetual debate in the kind of poker media world about like content that's made for pros versus content that's made for new players, rec players, right? I think I probably agree with the critique that like too much of this content is too pro driven, right? Content has shifted more toward high stakes cash games, stream cash games, because like you get a little bit more personality in there. I mean, all the critiques are like partly true. Like one critique is that like before computers and solvers, there was more variety in how people played, and so you had more personalities and more different playing styles, right? I think that's basically true, right? I think now that like with a theoretically unsound but good poker sense kind of skill set. I mean, like Mizrahi might have that, frankly, right? Which is part of why he was instantly
Yep.
inducted into the Hall of Fame.
And for people who don't remember, Mike Mizrahi is the winner of the World Series of Poker main event this year, the Grinder, and he also won the Players' Championship, and yes, was immediately inducted into the Hall of Fame after. Unprecedented. No one's ever done that before.
Pretty good summer, I would say. But in general, you've had a shift away from like mainstream broadcast stuff toward like Poker Go, and I like Poker Go. I like their tournaments. However, that's a subscription service targeted toward people like you and me that are either poker junkies or have some professional or adjacent to professional interests in the game. The large field WPT and World Series of Poker tournaments, right? Where like you have a big 4 or 5 day event, and then you narrow that down to whatever, to a small handful of players, a few of which you just by luck of the draw have good stories, right? Like is the main event of the World Series even on like linear TV anymore? Like a little bit on CBS.
Yeah,
right?
it is after the fact. So during the event you have live streams, and then those are edited down to, I believe, 30-minute kind of broadcasts that are more made for TV. And so there's limited coverage after the fact, where you have new announcers, sometimes new announcers, sometimes the same announcing team, where they actually kind of do new coverage, new soundtracks, and make it into more of a polished final product, as opposed to, let's watch all of these hands hand by hand so that it looks more dramatic, right? That's something, and I totally respect that. I think if you're going for a wide TV audience, poker can be so boring, Nate, right? Like you can sometimes be like sitting, and for us, like we're
Oh, no.
there.
Every now and then I get like a friend who'd be like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be in Vegas, but mostly playing poker." They're like, "Can I come watch you?"
Yeah,
I'm like,
exactly.
no,
Like, well,
you can. It would be,
it's
unless
so
I'm at the
yeah,
final table, it'd be boring as fuck, right?
even at the final table, like, I actually always encourage people, like, it's nice to have people on your rail, which are, the people who are watching, but I would never force someone I love to come on the rail and watch, because you can't see the cards. It's much more interesting to watch the stream on a screen where you can see what people have and you can follow along. When you're there live, like, all you see are the all-in confrontations, or when, a hand goes to showdown. You don't see the cards otherwise. But even if you're watching on screen, it can be quite boring because there are so many different things happening. So I understand the desire to bring people to craft narratives, to have drama, to bring people to the game in a way that makes them excited about poker. But, you know, how did people, craft narratives that make people excited about chess or Formula One or whatever it is? It's by being a good storyteller, but finding the stories, finding the people, using the material that you have, rather than kind of taking liberty and creating material on your own. So just to kind of bring this full circle, I think that by the way, like, we would be doing this. I think we'd be having this conversation even if this documentary had just smashed everything, in the sense that people were like, oh my God, this is phenomenal. This is so good. And it had just like through the roof viewership, which it did not. Someone took a screenshot of the number of views of each episode before they were taken off of YouTube. And it was like, I think it was like 20,000, 30, like it was not big numbers, right? Like it was much worse than a lot of the great poker content creators who actually have, many more views. I think the biggest one had like 40,000 views or something. And with every episode, it just like, it went down. And so if it had been huge and hugely kind of successful with millions of views, this would have, I think, in some ways been even more of an issue, right? Like that you had to that you had to lie, that you had to make shit up to bring in an audience. But now, like, you did that and and it was boring, right? Like you did that and you didn't do anything new. You did that and you didn't actually craft drama, bring people in, like, come create something that made people excited about the game that wasn't already somebody who loved the game, right? And so I think that's kind of, that's sort of beside the point. And it's absolutely not an excuse. In some ways, the more people, like if you're writing for an audience of one, right? Like if I had a private newsletter that was like on a private thing and I used AI to try to experiment and do things that I didn't really have to do, like I don't have to tell anyone, right? I'm my own audience, right? I can just do whatever and like play around. But if I have, as my audience grows, then I start having a responsibility to other people to actually kind of uphold some sort of standards. And so in some ways, like the bigger the success, the more responsibility you have to your subjects, to your audience, to the sport, right? You have a responsibility to poker. Why is it, Nate, that every single time we talk about poker, unless you or I have won something and there's like fun news that way, it's almost always some sort of a scandal, right? It's something negative. Like,
Yeah,
why don't we actually try to do things the right way to bring people into the game for the right reasons?
look, one problem is that there's a shitload of variants. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
imagine, um, like, what's the chance? This year was an exception that the main event of the World Series of Poker will be won by somebody that, like, even you or I had both heard of, let's say, in advance of the
Oh,
tournament, right?
very,
Like
very little.
under
Yeah.
50%, right? And we probably know a lot of people, and I do think there are large edges to like the pros in the main event, right? But
Yep.
like, yeah, and by the way, some of the names that won at the now are household names. I would not have known that name. I'd be like, that guy looks like some
No.
fucking
And
Norwegian poker player, right? But like, I wouldn't know that fucking
yeah,
person.
no, I love Espen. We're very friendly
Yeah.
now. But prior to Espen winning the main event of the World Series of Poker, I had no idea who he was. He's a lovely, lovely human. Great guy. But yeah, I
I
just had
wasn't.
no idea.
I'm
No
pro
idea.
Norway. I wasn't
Yep.
intending to
Yeah.
single out Espen, right?
But if you actually, I actually have done this. I've gone back like 10 years and started looking at the winners' names. I don't know most of them, right? They were probably players who people knew at the time, and like if you were around, you
Martin
still recognized.
Jacobson hosting,
Well,
and I'm just trying to picture the banners. Ryan Reese, some of these people I know, some of them are good
I know
players.
Ryan and I know Martin, but there are a lot of players who I'm like, I literally have never heard this name before. Which is to say, yes, there is a lot of variance, but there is drama. There are all these stories, and there is, I mean, there is good material here. Right? Like you absolutely can make something that's compelling. And I would, I mean, that's a hill I'm willing to die on. Like you can make compelling television out of poker, and people have, and it's not just like the high stakes shows of the past that had a huge viewership, but there are fictionalized accounts, like there are documentaries, there's reality TV. By the way, these are all different things, right? If you're making a reality TV show, like okay, that's scripted, that's not a documentary series. You already know it's going to be used differently, but you can make a compelling documentary. There are human stories, there's human drama. You just have to be a good filmmaker. You just have to be able to find those threads. Just like Nate, the exact same two journalists, the same, okay, two journalists can go to the exact same assignment, right? And write a story, like have the same assignment, write this story. And one can craft a Pulitzer Prize winning masterpiece, and the other like just a boring piece of who knows what. Like on the exact, like even talking to the same people, because somebody can see the story, can see the vision, knows how to kind of make it into something great, and the other one doesn't. And that's why oftentimes people, like when they find out what I'm working on, they're like, oh, aren't you afraid that someone else is going to steal that idea and write the same thing?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, because no one else is going to write it the way I do, right? Like everyone, like,
Or
go
like I'll be
ahead,
like, this
write the
person's
same
kind of in
idea.
your space and the sub. I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
but they suck. They suck, right? Not everybody,
No.
but sometimes they suck, and I'm like, I don't know if I can care. They suck. They're upside as cap. But yes, it's hard. It's hard to plan around like this content when like your stars are usually not going to win, right? I mean, this year's World Series main event had like way. It was like the 98th percentile interesting
This is very
characters
true.
and stories.
So do you know what you do, Nate, in that case? You tape 650 hours of content. You follow all of these different storylines, and you don't know which ones are going to end up being the prominent ones and the ones you want to use. And then you actually make something that's good and compelling out of it. So I would like to issue at the end of the show, I'd like to issue a challenge to creators, not just in poker, to always just do better, be good. Use whatever tools you need to use, but be honest. Do not cheat. Do not be lazy. You cannot tell good stories if you're being lazy. Nate, you've said the word lazy multiple times in this episode, and that's exactly what it is. It's intellectual laziness. It's just laziness all around. So don't be lazy. Actually find the good stories. And yes, in poker, it is hard, right? It's not like Formula One where if you follow the best drivers, you'll probably be following the winner. But if you cast a wide net, you can still figure it out. You can make it happen. Do it. Let's create something good.
And you need the passage of time, right? Shooting 600 hours of footage at like one tournament won't give you the passage of time for like narrative arcs, and people's lives get better and worse, and poker does create its share of dramatic moments, Maria.
Yes, it does indeed. So that is our take on Documentary Gate 2025.